So this is what they call an inciting incident. And I gotta be honest, when I first saw this watch, I dismissed it as being overly bizarre for the sake of it. How wrong I was, because then I found out this is actually a collaboration between Hamilton and Hideo Kojima. Now, if that name doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry, because this is actually where classic cinema, computer games, science fiction, Japanese, Swiss, American horology all come together for a fascinating story that's beyond the watch. Like a great movie, there's a plot twist. It gives us a glimpse into a possible future of watchmaking. I'll do a quick wristwatch check. Wearing the Squire 1521 PVD there, and I have it on the, it's not Fluker, who is this? The Tropic strap, that's right. I discussed in my recent unboxing. I'll leave a link there if you missed it. But yeah, amazing combination. I have to be honest, I haven't really taken this off much since the unboxing. This vulcanized rubber strap from Holben's is just fantastic. Great breathable strap for summer. Been working out in this. Yeah, and I love the matcha vibes. Really think it complements the watch perfectly. Super, super comfortable. Now, in full transparency, I have to state that this is a sponsored video. Hamilton have kindly offered to sponsor the production only. True OGs, original Gentry out there will know that this is a very rare occurrence. This video is all my own opinion. Nobody has control over what I say, what I feel, any of that, because I will be just as unrelenting, and I want to be fair because there are as many negatives here as there are positives. So I'm going to discuss it as I would any watch. So if you never see a Hamilton ever again on my channel, you know why. But jokes aside, kudos to them for showing faith in me, because a lot of brands don't. They don't want me to talk about the negatives of any of their watches, and I think, what's the point, right? Why are we here, right? Please don't forget to thumbs up this video if you want to see more independent content like this. And let me know, was I too harsh on this, or was I too kind? Let me know at the end of the video in the comments below. What the hell is this watch, and why is it so important? Well, time for some context, obviously. Hamilton, as we've explored in great detail before, is unquestionably a brand with an insanely rich history. From the golden age of American railroad horology, powerhouse watchmaking with many landmark industry-changing innovations in the post-war period, to producing military timepieces for over a century. But there's also another side to Hamilton that is profoundly relevant to today's topic, which is of course the brand being a very early innovator in getting watches onto the silver screen. The first was in Shanghai Express, as far back as 1932, with Marlene Dietrich.
I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I'd known for just 1 second, you'd be back to bother me. Go on now, go. Walk out the door.
Frank, bring your head in this window before I roll it up in there.
Got it.
In fact, the last time I checked, it was over 400 titles under their belt, but most likely approaching 500 now. Perhaps even more if you include TV and streaming. From specially crafting watch props in sci-fi classics like Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, to more contemporary and beloved timepieces of Christopher Nolan's Capolavoro, Interstellar. Then there's the Ventura in the Men in Black and Dune movies, which was already made legendary twice over by not only being the choice of Elvis Presley, but it also happened to be the first electronic watch before the advent of quartz. With its 1950s Jetsons Googie Kitsch Cadillac winged styling, it doesn't get more iconic in big giant quote marks than that, and hence, spoilers alert, I'm seriously considering myself. But more on the Ventura in a later video. And talking of film franchises, I've already covered the watch worn by Jeffrey Wright as Felix Leiter in the James Bond movies, and also Simon Pegg's X-Wind, recently discussed in my Mission Impossible video. I've actually owned a version of it before embarking on my YouTube journey over a decade ago. Not to mention the talented Mr. Ripley, one of the worst Die Hard sequels, I'm sorry to say. In fact, the watch was the only decent thing about it. Then there's TV shows like Mad Men, Jack Ryan, and the list goes on and on. You get the picture. Oh, nice little pun there. Anyway, name your favourite screen-used Hamilton in the comments, please. And the best nominations I will consider in a future video. So, before I get carried away talking about movies, right, because I could all day, why is this relevant? Well, Kojima is a huge cinema fan. This is probably one of the most important traits that differentiates between him and all the other game designers, just how much his work is deeply, deeply rooted and inspired by the movies.
で日本映画なんでまず誰でも知ってる、黒澤明さん。
Kojima's obsessive cinephilia explains why my favourite movie star of all time, Mads Mikkelsen, was in the first Death Stranding game, as well as Léa Seydoux.
We did like almost 100 takes.
Yes, that Léa Seydoux. And if that wasn't proof enough, there was even film directing legends Guillermo del Toro and Nicholas Winding Refn, amongst many others, making cameos. In the lead role was Norman Reedus, who reprises this protagonist for the sequel, featuring today's watch.
I think that Kojima's love of Western pop culture is one of those things that endears him the most in the public eye. Metal Gear's titular character, Solid Snake, a reference to Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken character from the films Escape from LA and Escape from New York. Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, one giant homage to the Cold War era James Bond films.
Oh my god, what's wrong with you?
Kojima is considered one of the greatest and simultaneously polarizing video game designers of all time, mainly due to being a pioneering auteur, uncompromising in his vision, having developed a strong passion for film and literature during his childhood, which in turn has a significance on all his games and how he creates them.
It's time for you to hit the road and start a new journey.
The result is immersive experiences, atmospheric worlds, intricate narratives, and richly fleshed out characters, often Lynchian in weirdness, but also, as an excellent Washington Post article by Gene Parks so rightly put, and I quote, setting the storytelling standard for the medium, with themes and story beats often feeling uncannily prescient, end quote. Think of him as the gaming equivalent of what Christopher Nolan or David Lynch is to cinema. Critically venerated by many, but also criticized as pretentious and often just confusing to others.
Yeah, he's got really unique ideas where he thinks the gaming world will go next. They're kind of mind-blowing.
So this Marmite-like quality extends to the watch itself, naturally. So much so that when I first saw this, I thought, are they trolling us watch fans? That was my initial reaction, you know. So is the extreme nature of this divisiveness. That's what I thought. First introduced in 1941, the Boulton was one of Hamilton's most popular watches of that decade and quintessential in its original looks, very much defining what the brand was all about, beyond its martial timekeeping offerings for the war effort. Revived in the 1980s as a quartz dress watch and then again recently as the Indiana Jones watch, which we have also covered a few years ago. However, this time around, the mission they chose to accept, that's a nice little deep cut there, was instead of reimagining something from almost a century in the past, was to imagine a Boulton as if it was from a Kojima future. Naturally, a lighter titanium would have been used as the base metal for the trademark tonneau-shaped case, and so it was, with a PVD finish to match the hardware found on the metallic detailing of the game's setting and character design. The art direction was once again dictated by Yoji Shinkawa, with his signature Gundam or anime-like inspired costumes, spacesuits and gadgetry. What is immediately noticeable is the 7 sapphire glass windows that make up the front display in a cockpit-like structure. It not only reflects the game's industrial futuristic styling, but also the player's modular cargo system, various equipment and in-game vehicles. But more importantly, on a more profound level, mankind's symbolic attempt to try and protect or cage and contain time itself. Very clever, especially when you consider Kojima's a watch guy himself, and undoubtedly would have had input here in his true punctilious auteur fashion. He even openly stated that James Cameron's Capolavoro Aliens was the inspiration behind this particular sequel. I mean, the likeness to the cargo loader that Ripley uses in that memorable climactic duel is not a coincidence.
Get away from her, you...
The hour and minute hand continues the skeletonized theme, with only the seconds hand breaking away from the darkness with a bright neon orange, matching the applied 12 o'clock marker, much like many retro-futurist watches of the 1970s did. There's an interesting use of geometry and contrasting textures to the dial that, to the untrained eye, might suggest Art Deco, or perhaps Future Deco would be a more accurate simulacrum. The significance of the 12 o'clock marker being highlighted, I guess, is another potential Easter egg that we will just have to wait to play the game to discover the meaning behind it. Powering it is the modified H10, on full display under the 8th sapphire glass panel on the back, complete with the game branding and all the impressive 80-hour power reserve performance you'd expect at this level. Now, in the past, I've been very critical of Swatch's use of modular movement design at the more affordable level. They did this to make serviceability, production cheaper. In this context, actually, I have to say it really does work. The sparseness and utilitarian machine-making machines kind of thing really complements the design dictum and language of the overall watch. So in this regard, yeah, it totally makes sense. The watch is not without its faults. The overall scale is far too big in my opinion, despite what the measurements will have you believe, and while I understand what the bracelet is trying to achieve in suggesting a kind of on-trend Gentry-like integration without actually being integrated, it's only slightly tapering on the very first link, making it seem overly clumsy and wide. But at least, thank God, it's also in a lighter titanium, so not the end of the world there. The caged display is kind of counterintuitive if you think about it. It's not parallax errors this time, but instead the framing partly obscures legibility when viewed from various angles, and thus increases the risk of water damage by basically having more compromisable edges where the case meets the sapphire glass. If it's actually practical in protecting the watch and the dial, I guess you'd have to have space battles with aliens to really find that one out. Therefore, combined with the pull-push crown, the depth rating is only 50 meters, sadly. Its aggressive construction will naturally alienate many. Pun, I swear, not intended. But this is where we get to one of the most fascinating aspects of this watch. You see, it was not designed for us traditional watch enthusiasts, but fans of the game, and beyond that, worshippers at the Church of Kojima. These people don't care about accuracy, the movement being hackable, which it is by the way, and all the other horological Star Trek-like techno-babble that we obsess over. But as if a sign from the horological gods, at the very same time I found out about this avant-garde Hamilton, I got a comment on the Seiko Metal Gear Solid Watch video that, to be honest, I totally forgot about. I purchased it for only a few $100 to review donkeys years ago, being a fan of arguably Kojima's most defining game franchise. Well, fast forward back to the future of today, and they go for absolutely thousands of dollars. And no matter how much the traditional watch fans might have despised that particular Seiko, or possibly even this Hamilton, I don't doubt for a second that this limited edition will go exactly the same way in terms of value. I did a little bit of digging about, and I realize now the strategic importance, the scope and scale and power of the games market compared to cinema and what Hamilton are trying to do. So according to Forbes, now bear in mind this report was in 2023, reports indicate that the global video game market is projected to reach over 200 billion, while the film industry typically generates about 40 to 50 billion annually. Now in 2025 it's easily surpassed that, so they were right. Crucially, what that means is, I mean, aside from being 4 times as bigger as the film industry, it reaches a wider demographic and a younger demographic. I mean, let's be real. Younger people are much more likely to go and buy a computer game than see the latest Wim Wenders or Herzog or Takashi Kitano or Gaspar Noé movie, you know, much to my disappointment. With the mechanical watch industry against its biggest threat since the quartz crisis in the form of the comically named so-called smartwatch, and the stylistically bankrupt Apple surveillance device, Apple Watch, anything getting new generations into watches is undoubtedly a win in my book. And this more affordable entry level is the vital battleground if the watch industry is to win the war against the machines. Swatch, in a wider sense, knows this. This may not be a watershed moment, like the worldwide queue-inducing Moon Swatch. It certainly is another step in the right direction. If anyone in the Swatch empire has got the heritage, price point, and design chops to have a hit again, it's Hamilton. After all, the Boulton costs just over twice as much compared to the average Apple Watch abomination. That, lest we forget, becomes technologically dated the moment you walk out of the Skynet store with it, via an insidiously, deliberately inbuilt obsolescence, no matter if it's the battery or software update. Whereas the Boulton can last for generations if maintained, and ironically, despite being a far more rudimentary form of machinery, will only increase in value due to the pop culture provenance. How poetic is that? Now, where did I leave my minigun? I can just imagine the comments on this watch, but you know what? At least it's interesting and it's not boring. Watches tend to be a little bit samey, so kudos for that. And it is taking a risk, certainly. Come to think of it, more computer game character and watch pairings in the comments. Sonic the Hedgehog with a Glashut Original Panomatic. Can you imagine that? Super Mario with a Panerai. It's a me, a Super Mario with my Luminor. Porca miseria. Do nominate your favorites in the comments. We could do a whole episode just on that. Yeah, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts. Onwards and upwards. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.